Imagine you spent 20 years working on a single project. Every day, $300 million. Every single day, that's $2.3 trillion total. According to the Congressional Research Service, more than the entire GDP of Italy. Enough to give every American household roughly $18,000. And after 20 years, your project collapsed in 11 days. $85 billion in equipment. Abandoned. 300,000 trained soldiers. Melted away like ghosts. Most people call Afghanistan the war. America lost. But what if I told you there's another way to look at it? What if Afghanistan was an investment that performed exactly as the incentives predicted? Not designed to win. Designed to spend. Now, let me be clear, I'm not suggesting some conspiracy. This isn't politics. It's accounting. I'm going to show you the actual mechanisms, documented by government auditors themselves, that turned a 20-year war into a $2.3 trillion spending machine. These are official government findings, not speculation. We're going to examine 6 well-documented mechanisms that explain how the system actually worked. From the blank check that bypassed Congress, to the ghost army that auditors documented for years, to the winner's circle where the profits went. Here's a question most people never think to ask. How do you spend $2.3 trillion without Congress really noticing? The answer is something called emergency supplemental appropriations. And once you understand how it works, everything else makes sense. Normally, government spending goes through months of hearings, debates, and oversight. Agencies compete for limited budget dollars. There are trade-offs. If we spend here, we can't spend there. But emergency spending, it bypasses much of that process. After September 11, 2001, a significant portion of Afghanistan funding was labeled an emergency. Year 1, emergency. Year 5, still emergency. Year 10, emergency. Year 19, according to budget analysts, still classified as emergency. Let's make this personal. Meet Sarah. She represents a typical American taxpayer. Over 20 years. The average household contributed roughly $18,000 to Afghanistan. But Sarah never got to vote on most of it. Because emergency spending doesn't work like normal spending. There's no competing for budget dollars. No, if we spend here, we can't spend there. It's a blank check. According to the Congressional Research Service, over 70% of Afghanistan war funding came through supplementals, not regular appropriations. 70%. That's approximately $1.6 trillion that bypassed normal budget oversight. And here's the key. When spending has no ceiling and no competition, the incentive isn't to spend efficiently. It's to spend. Period. So what did all that blank check spending actually pay for? Well, officially, it paid for an Afghan army of 300,000 soldiers. But there was just one problem. 300,000. That was the official number. 300,000 Afghan soldiers and police that America trained over 20 years. $83 billion invested. Except, according to multiple Inspector General reports, most of them didn't exist. They were called ghost soldiers. Names on paper. Collecting paychecks. But nobody was actually there. Afghan commanders would inflate their troop counts to pocket the extra salaries. C.G.R., the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, documented this problem extensively over many years. In some units, only 20% of soldiers actually showed up. 20%. That means for every 100 soldiers we thought we were paying. In the worst cases, Only 20 were real. The other 80, ghosts. But the money was very, very real. This pattern was described by many veterans. One trainer, who we'll call Sergeant Mike, did 4 tours in Afghanistan training these forces. He watched the same base get handed over to Afghan control 3 different times. 3 times. Because each time, the Afghan units simply disappeared. We'd train 500 soldiers, he says. Come back 6 months later. Maybe 50 are still there. The rest, who knows? But the training contracts kept coming. The equipment kept shipping. The money kept flowing. So when Kabul fell in 11 days, it wasn't because 300,000 soldiers were defeated. It was because many of those soldiers never really existed in the first place. The army was largely a ghost. But the $83 billion, that was real. Someone received every single dollar. Which brings us to the most important question. Who designed a system where this was not just possible, but profitable? How do you design a system where the more you spend, the more you earn? Where going over budget is actually rewarded? Where there is often zero incentive to come in under cost? It's called cost plus contracting. And it explains a lot. Here's how it works. A contractor says, this project will cost $100 million. The government says, we'll pay your costs, plus a percentage profit. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the catch. If the project costs $200 million instead, the contractor's profit doubles. $300 million. Triples. There is structurally zero financial incentive to come in under budget. In fact, the incentive points the other direction entirely. In Afghanistan, cost-plus contracts were widespread. Building bases, training troops, providing logistics, supplying food, fuel, and ammunition. SIGAR found numerous examples of projects that ran 10 times, 20 times, and in some cases, 50 times over their original budgets. A $500,000 building became a $25 million building. And every overrun. More profit for the contractor. The Inspector General called it a system designed for cost growth. Not designed for efficiency. Not designed for results. Designed for cost growth. Multiple former contractors have described similar experiences. One former defense contractor, who asked to remain anonymous, explained it this way. Nobody got promoted for finishing under budget. Nobody got a bonus for saving taxpayer money. But if you could justify spending more, that was career advancement. Bigger contracts meant bigger teams. Bigger teams meant bigger titles. The system didn't just allow waste. It incentivized it. And nowhere was this incentive more visible than in reconstruction. $144.7 billion. According to SIGAR, that's what America spent on reconstruction in Afghanistan. Schools, hospitals, roads, power plants, democracy. The promise was to build a nation. The reality was something else entirely. SIGAR documented numerous cases of schools built in districts with no teachers, hospitals with no electricity, power plants that cost $300 million and produced power for 23 cents per kilowatt, when you could buy it locally for 4 cents. The Inspector General documented projects that were abandoned the moment they were completed, buildings that collapsed within months, equipment that nobody knew how to operate, roads that led nowhere, airports with no planes. The reconstruction wasn't failing. It was succeeding at the wrong metric. Let me give you one example that captures everything. The Kayaki Dam. According to official reports, America spent approximately $600 million upgrading it. The goal: provide power to Kandahar province. Sound reasonable? Here's what happened. The turbines were ordered, shipped across the world, installed at enormous cost. But the transmission lines to connect the dam to Kandahar never completed. The dam was never fully connected to the grid. The turbines sat unused for years. And today, the Taliban controls the entire project. Approximately $600 million. We succeeded at spending. We failed at everything else. This is the pattern you need to understand. We didn't fail at reconstruction. We succeeded at spending on reconstruction. Those are two very different things. The metric was never schools that educate. It was contracts awarded. Never hospitals that heal. Always dollars obligated. And then came August 2021, when 20 years of spending faced 11 days of reality. August 6, 2021. The Taliban captures its first provincial capital, Zaran, in Nimroz province. After 20 years, the beginning of the end takes less than 24 hours. And then the dominoes fall. Day 1 through 3. 4 provincial capitals fall. Day 4 through 7. 18 more. Day 8 through 10. The ring around Kabul collapses. Taliban forces are at the gates. Day 11. The president boards a helicopter, reportedly with cash. The Taliban walks into the presidential palace. No battle. No resistance. Just arrival. The 300,000-strong army didn't lose a war. It simply stopped pretending to exist. This sentiment was echoed by many Afghans who worked with U.S. forces. Ahmad, an interpreter for U.S. forces for 8 years, watched the collapse from inside. Everyone knew, he says. The soldiers knew they weren't being paid. The commanders knew they were stealing. The Americans knew we knew. But nobody wanted to write the report that said the truth. Because the truth would have stopped the money. And the money kept coming. When the smoke cleared, America had left behind an estimated $85 billion in military equipment. Humvees, helicopters, night vision goggles, weapons, aircraft. All now in Taliban hands. But here's a question worth considering. Was that equipment ever really meant to stay? Think about it. Every piece of abandoned equipment will eventually need to be replaced. With new contracts, new spending, new profits. The end of one war is the beginning of the next budget cycle. Which brings us to the final question. $2.3 trillion. 20 years. A collapsed government. 300,000 ghost soldiers. Who actually won? $2.3 trillion. 20 years. A collapsed government. 300,000 ghost soldiers. $85 billion in abandoned equipment. By any normal definition, this was a catastrophic failure. But failure for whom? According to Brown University's Costs of War project, defense contractors received over $1 trillion of Afghanistan spending. $1 trillion. Names, you know. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, plus logistics giants like KBR, Fluor, and DynCorp. Their stock prices. They didn't lose the war. According to market data, from 2001 to 2021, defense stocks outperformed the S&P 500 by approximately 58%. For investors in these companies, Afghanistan was a 20-year bull market. Here's where it gets interesting. Many of the officials who oversaw Afghanistan's spending, they went on to work for the same contractors who received that spending. Generals became consultants. Pentagon officials became board members. Policy advisors became lobbyists. The people who wrote the checks joined the companies that cashed them. This is documented in public records. It's called the revolving door, and it's been spinning for decades. For regular Americans like Sarah, Afghanistan was a loss. $18,000 per household. 2,400 service members killed. 20,000 wounded. 20 years of treasure and blood. But for the system itself, Afghanistan delivered exactly what the incentive structure predicted. Not victory. Not democracy. Not security. Spending. Continuous. Predictable. Profitable spending. And by that metric, Afghanistan was a spectacular success. So here's what I want you to understand. Afghanistan wasn't a bug. It was a feature. A feature of a system designed to prioritize spending over outcomes. Contracts over accountability. Process over results. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This same system is still running. The same contractors, the same cost-plus structures, the same emergency spending, just different names, different places. The spending machine that ran Afghanistan didn't stop when Kabul fell. It just moved to the next emergency, the next crisis, the next blank check. Now, to be fair, many people in these institutions are dedicated, public servants, trying to do good work. The problem isn't individuals. It's incentive structures. So, the next time someone says we failed in Afghanistan, ask yourself, failed at what? For whom? By whose definition of success? And, more importantly, where is this mechanism running right now? I'm not telling you what to think. I'm showing you a framework for analyzing government spending. Don't ask whether a program succeeded or failed. Ask, what was it actually designed to do? Follow the money. Follow the incentives. The rest becomes clear. If this was valuable, you'll want to see how the Pentagon has failed its financial audit for 7 straight years. And why nobody seems to care. That video is here. And until next time, don't let the budget bite.